There is one kind of person you can never win against. Not the strongest, not the loudest, the one you cannot move. You push, and there is nothing to push against. You insult him, and the insult just hangs there in the air with your name on it instead of his. And the longer he says nothing, the more it is you who starts to look like the problem. Picture a theater in Athens, more than 2,000 years ago. Stone seats climbing up a hillside, packed with people. On the stage, a poet named Sisyphus, and he has decided to get an easy laugh at one man's expense. He points him out, an old man sitting quietly among the rows, and delivers a line he wrote special for the occasion. He calls the man a fool. Then he tells the crowd this is the donkey they all follow around like cattle. 1,000 heads turn to look, and the old man does nothing. He does not stand. He does not shout back. His face does not even move. He sits there and lets the insult land and die, the way a wave lands on a rock and slides off it. And here's the part that should interest you. The crowd, watching him take the hit without a flicker, does not laugh at him. They turn on the poet. They are so moved by the old man's stillness that they start to applaud him, right there in his seat. And they drive Sisyphus off his own stage. The poet came to break him in front of 1,000 people. He left, having broken only himself. And you already know the other side of this, because you have lived it. You got the comment in the meeting and felt your face go hot. You fired back a half-second too fast and regretted the words before they finished leaving your mouth. Later you lay awake at 2 in the morning, rebuilding the line you could not find when it actually counted. Somewhere along the way you decided that the people who stay unmoved in those moments were simply born that way, a different breed, wired colder than you from the start. That is the lie this video is going to take apart. Because that old man in the theater was not born calm. He started as the worst possible candidate for it. And by the end of this, you are going to walk away with 3 things: who he actually was, and how a slow, poor, mocked ex-fighter became the most unshakable man of his age. The exact physical thing that changed inside his skull to make it possible, with the brain scans that prove it is real. And what his kind of stillness does to the person on the other side of it, the one burning energy trying to get a rise out of you, so that you can do to them what that old man did to the poet. Stay with me. Nothing about this man should have worked. His name was Cleanthes. And before he was a philosopher, he was a boxer. Not the clean-gloved version you picture. The ancient kind, fought with the bare hands wrapped in strips of hard leather, out in the open, where the whole task was to keep standing while another man tried to take you apart. That was his trade. He was a fighter from a town called Assos, out on the far rim of the Greek world, and he was not a clever young man. Almost everything we know about him comes from a later biographer named Diogenes Laertius, who collected the lives of the old philosophers, and even in his own school, even years later when he was a serious man of ideas, people kept coming away thinking he was slow, dull, a little dim. He arrived in Athens with 4 drachmae to his name. Almost nothing. Enough to eat for a few days, not enough to live on. Athens at that time was the center of the thinking world, crowded with schools where famous men taught the sons of the rich, and Cleanthes was none of those things. He was a broke, aging fighter who spoke slowly and wanted in. So he made an arrangement that tells you everything about him. He found a teacher, a man named Zeno, who was building something new, a way of living that would later be called Stoicism. Cleanthes wanted to study under him, but he had no money for it and no way to earn any during the day without missing the lessons. So he worked at night. He carried water. He went to the gardens after dark and hauled water for the people who grew things. And he needed flour for a woman who sold bread all night, every night, so that when the sun came up he could go and sit and learn with nothing in his pockets and the water still drying on his arms. The other students had a name for him. They called him the ass, the donkey, because he was slow and because he just kept carrying load after load without a word of complaint, the way a pack animal does. And here is the first move that should change how you see this whole thing. Cleanthes took the insult and kept it. He said yes, he was the ass because the ass is the only animal with a back strong enough to carry whatever Zeno chose to load onto it. He did not fight the name. Instead, he absorbed it and turned it into the opposite of what they meant by it. His entire life ran on that one move. The world pushed, and where the push expected to find something soft and reactive, it found nothing to grab. There was even a day the city authorities dragged him in front of a court, suspicious that a man with no visible income was somehow healthy and well-fed. They wanted to know how he lived. Cleanthes did not argue or plead or take offense. He simply brought in the gardener he drew water for and the woman he needed flour for, and let them speak for him. The court was so struck by the man that they voted to hand him money, but Zeno, his teacher, forbade him to take it. This is who we are talking about, a man underestimated at every single turn and written off before he opened his mouth. And he wins anyway, over and over, not by reacting harder than everyone around him, but by reacting less, by becoming something the pressure simply could not get inside of. When his teacher Zeno died, it was Cleanthes, the slow one, the donkey, the ex-fighter, who took over the entire school and ran it for the better part of 30 years. He wrote a hymn that is still read today. The clever men who laughed at him are footnotes. He became the spine of the whole tradition. So here is the question that should be burning in you now. How does the worst candidate in the room, the slow ex-fighter everyone wrote off, become the one man nobody alive can rattle? Because if calm were a personality you are simply born holding, Cleanthes never had it. He should have been the easiest man in Athens to break. A loud, physical past. No status, no money, an accent of poverty on everything he did. Every one of those was a place he could have flared up, gotten defensive, snapped to protect himself. He did the exact opposite, on purpose, for decades. Which means it was not a trait he was issued at birth. It was a thing he built. And only recently have we been able to open up the skull and watch that thing get built. For most of human history, people believed the brain you grew up with was the brain you were stuck with. That once you were grown, the wiring was set, and a nervous man stayed nervous and a calm man stayed calm, the way your height stops climbing in your 20s. That turned out to be flatly wrong. The brain physically rebuilds itself in response to what you do over and over. The connections thicken where you use them, and wither where you do not. There is a name for this, and it is the most important word in this entire story. It is called neuroplasticity, and it means the hardware that decides whether you hold steady or come apart is not fixed concrete. It is more like muscle. It changes with reps. And the people who study composure have now caught it happening on a scanner. Start with the work out of Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital, led by a researcher named Sarah Lazar. Her team scanned the brains of people who had spent years drilling one deliberate rep over and over, holding attention down on purpose and refusing to let it bolt at every pull. The exact move Cleanthes ran in the dark. Then they compared those brains against people who had never trained that way at all. The difference was not a mood. It was structural. In the trained group, the prefrontal cortex, the region right behind your forehead that does your deciding and your holding back, was measurably thicker, more gray matter, in the exact part of the brain you need online when something is trying to drag you under. Now you might think fine, but maybe those people were simply born with more of it, and that is what drew them to the training in the first place. So the same kind of team ran the harder version of the experiment. They took ordinary people who had never done any of this, total beginners. They put them through 8 weeks of the same daily training, and they scanned their brains before and after. And in that short window, the gray matter measurably grew. In the exact regions that decide whether you hold the line or come apart when someone comes for you. 2 months of reps, and the physical structure of the brain had already started to change.
Hold that number.
8 weeks. That is the comment in the meeting that used to wreck you, handled 40 or 50 times. That is published work in a journal called Psychiatry Research, and it quietly kills the excuse you have been leaning on.
The hardware is not handed to you. Finished.
At birth, it answers to training, and it answers fast, which means the steadiness that empties a room of people onto your side is not a gift you were denied. It is a structure you can build, and then point at the next person who tries you. But the most important piece is what happens to the alarm. Sitting deep in the brain is a small structure called the amygdala. It is your threat detector. The thing that fires first and fires fast when you feel attacked, the spark underneath the hot face and the sharp reply and the heart climbing into your throat. It is also the part of Cleanthes the poet was trying to trip, and the part of you that lights up the instant the comment lands. The same Harvard and Massachusetts General team measured it directly. As people trained and as their stress came down, the amygdala physically changed. The gray matter density in the threat detector went down. The alarm did not just get quieter for a while, it got structurally smaller. Then there is the work coming out of the University of Wisconsin, from the lab of a researcher named Richard Davidson, who has spent decades scanning people across every level of this training, from raw beginners to people with tens of thousands of hours behind them. The pattern is brutally consistent, and in the people with the most training behind them, the threat detector reacted less to the same distressing things. The deepest training tracked with the quietest alarm. The most practiced people are not heroically holding down a screaming threat response. Their threat response itself has been turned down at the source. Put those together and the whole secret is laid out on a screen. Calm is not a temperament you either got or missed. It is a structure, a thicker break in the front of the brain, and a smaller, quieter alarm underneath it. And both of them get built the exact same way a fighter builds anything at all, by doing the rep and then doing it again, long after it has stopped being interesting. Now go back to Cleanthes, hauling water in the dark. Nobody scanned his brain. We cannot say the boxing did it or the water carrying or any one thing. That is not the claim. The claim is that his entire life was reps. Every time someone called him the donkey and he chose not to bite, that was a rep. Every time he was underestimated and answered with stillness instead of heat, that was a rep. For decades in a city full of men quicker and richer and louder than him, he trained the same single move over and over. The refusal to be moved, until it stopped being a thing he did and became the thing he was. He is the proof walking around 2,000 years before the scanner existed. The slow man built his calm the same way he once built his body, by putting in volume nobody else was willing to match. And this is where it stops being a private virtue and becomes a weapon pointed at other people. Because what you are growing in that skull does its loudest work on someone else. Think about what the person trying to provoke you is actually doing. Whether it is a poet on a stage or a coworker who waits until the room is full and then says it with a little smile, they are not really after the insult itself. They are after your reaction. The flinch is the prize. So picture the meeting, everyone seated, and the line arrives, aimed at you and dressed up as a joke. No surprise there, we all kind of figured you would be the one to drop this. They poke, and then they watch your face. And the second something moves, the jaw that tightens, the breath that jumps, the word that comes out too sharp, they have their confirmation. They found the lever, the proof they have power over your state. So they pull it again, harder. Now take the flinch away. You give them the thing Cleanthes gave the poet, a steady face, a level look, nothing, and watch what that does to them, because on their side it is the furthest thing from nothing. That first line was built to land and drag a response out of you, and it got nothing back. So they reach for a second one, sharper, with a little more weight behind it. I'm only saying what everyone in this room is already thinking. Still nothing. The air in the room has started to change, and it is not changing in their favor. They go a third time, and now you can hear it. The edge creeping into a voice that was smooth a minute ago. They lean in, and they say the thing people say when their own brake has slipped. Why are you just sitting there? Say something. That sentence is the sound of their alarm going off. While you stayed level, theirs climbs. Their heart is up. Their face is warm. The threat detector you refuse to feed is now screaming inside their own skull. Because nothing unnerves a person hunting for a reaction like the total absence of one. You did not attack them. You simply declined to play. And all the pressure they brought into the room had nowhere to go. So it turned around and went into them. The crowd turned on the poet. The room turns on the coworker. Every time, the frame flips. And you never had to lift your voice. The same way a slow old man emptied a theater of people onto his side without once getting out of his seat. And here's the dark version of the same law. The part that should worry you, because it has been running on you this whole time. Neuroplasticity does not care which way you train. The brain builds whatever you rehearse. So every time you do take the bait, every time you snap, every time you fire back fast to feel like you won the moment, you are also doing a rep. You are running current through the alarm. You are teaching the threat detector that yes, this was an emergency, react. And over enough repetitions it learns the lesson and starts firing faster and harder at smaller and smaller things. Most people are not neutral. They are quietly training themselves, every day, to be more reactive, more rattled, more easily owned. The person trying to provoke you is, without knowing it, building a hotter alarm in their own head with every escalation. You can be building the opposite. But here is where almost everyone gets this wrong, and it is the whole difference between people who want to be calm and people who actually are. You cannot install this in the moment you need it. Look at the brain for one more second. The part you would use to talk yourself down, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking, deciding part, is the first thing to drop offline the instant you feel attacked. So the advice you have heard your entire life, just stay calm, just do not let it get to you, just shrug it off when it happens, is close to useless on its own. It is asking the one part of your brain that has already walked out of the room to come back and fix everything. That is exactly why willpower fails you at the moment it matters, and why the perfect calm answer only arrives at 2 in the morning, hours after the threat is gone and the thinking part has finally come back online. Cleanthes did not win in the theater that day. He won in the 10,000 nights before it. The rep was never the dramatic public comeback. It was the boring, invisible, unglamorous choice, made over and over when nobody was watching and nothing was on fire, to not be moved by the small thing, the water in the dark, and the name he refused to fight. By the time the poet came for him in public, there was no decision left to make. The structure was already built. He was not being calm that day. He had become it years earlier. So if you cannot summon it in the crisis, you build it before the crisis, in the same dull, patient way he did. This is going to sound too simple, which is the exact reason most people skip it and stay rattled their whole lives. You train the rep when nothing is wrong. You take the small provocations that used to own you, the email that tightens your chest, the comment built to get a rise, the relative who knows the exact sentence to use, the driver who cuts you off in traffic, and you treat each one as a single repetition. A rep waiting to be done right. You feel the heat start to climb, and you let it climb, and you give it nothing, just hold. That is one rep against every person who is ever going to reach for that lever and expect to find it. It will feel like nothing. It will feel like losing, even like you should have said something back. Do it anyway, because every time you let the surge come and refuse to ride it, you are doing in real life what those scans were measuring. You are running the brake and starving the alarm. You are telling the threat detector that this thing it flagged was not actually an emergency, and over enough reps it starts to believe you and stops firing so hard. And notice what this is not. This is not suppression. That is the part people get backwards and ruin. Suppression is clenching your face shut over a fire that is still roaring underneath, and people can feel the strain pouring off you, the effort leaking out at the edges. What you are building here is the other thing entirely. You are training the fire itself to be smaller, so that on the day it counts there is simply less to hold, and eventually almost nothing. That is the only version of calm that cannot be faked and cannot be taken from you. Not a mask stretched tight over panic. A threat response trained down at the root, one rep at a time, until the thing that used to wreck you barely registers, and the person across from you, still running hot, still hunting for the flinch, reaches for the lever and finds a wall where it used to be. Cleanthes ran that school for the better part of 30 years, the slow donkey who outlasted every clever man who ever laughed at him, and the way he left is the last thing worth knowing about him. As an old man, near 100 years old, he developed a sickness, and his doctors told him to stop eating for a couple of days to let it heal. He did. When they came back and told him he could start eating again, he refused. He said he had already come too far along the road to turn back now. And he held that line the way he held every line in his life, all the way to the end. The man could not be moved. Not by an insult, not by poverty, not by 1,000 people in a theater, not even by his own hunger. Every bit of it built, none of it born. That is the power of staying calm and not reacting under pressure, and now you know what it actually is underneath. Not a gift handed down to a lucky few, a structure, a thicker brake, and a quieter alarm, grown the only way anything real ever gets grown, by doing the rep long after it stopped being interesting. The people you have always quietly envied, the ones nothing seems to touch, are not made of colder material than you. They were not handed steadier nerves at birth. They are just further down the same road you are standing on, and they started carrying water in the dark long before you did. So the only question left is whose alarm is going to be the one that fires the next time it actually matters. Theirs, while you sit there unreadable and let it climb on its own, or yours. You were not born rattled. You were untrained. Start the reps today, while nothing is wrong, so that on the day everything is, you are already the one they cannot move.